Good morning. I want to thank everyone for attending this morning's maintenance certification panel discussion. Over the past several years, the Pennsylvania Medical Society has convened multiple national stakeholder meetings such as this one, so we can all better understand the problems associated with maintenance certification process, as well as share with each other what efforts are underway throughout the country to better have us work together to help reform this process, which is in desperate need of change. My name is Scott Shapiro. I'm a member of the Pennsylvania delegation to the AMA, and I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Medical Society. It's my hope that this morning's meeting will not just help us shed more light on the MOC problems or help us focus at the root of the problem, but rather that many of us are going to leave today's meeting, go back to our representative states with a plan of us working together in a more collaborative way to more rapidly start to reform this process together. This morning, we have a distinguished group of panelists to speak with us who will present to us their work and views on maintenance of certification. After their presentations, I'd like to update everybody on where the Pennsylvania Medical Society is and what we've done since all of us last met together at our last MOC meeting, at the interim meeting in November. Finally, the last half of this meeting this morning is really reserved for open mic discussion. I'd like to point out that this meeting is being videotape recorded, so you should just be keeping that in mind if anything you say you would like to not have memorialized on video. With that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Charles Kroll. Mr. Kroll is a financial and accounting consultant. He's a graduate of Loyola University of Chicago and the DePaul University Graduate School of Business. He heads his own international CPA firm and specializes in healthcare and not-for-profit financial accounting and consulting. His past clients include the Minnesota Eye Consultants, the Minnesota Specialty Physicians, as well as the Mercy Hospitals and Health Centers. Mr. Kroll was quoted in an article that you're probably all very familiar with from April 7, 2015 in Newsweek, titled A Certified Medical Controversy. His topic this morning is the ABIM and the finances of maintenance of certification. Mr. Kroll.
Thank you, Dr. Shapiro. Before I get started, I'd like to thank the Pennsylvania Medical Society for the invitation to this session. This has been a story that I've been involved in since the summer of 2014. I know we're limited for time this morning, and I'd like to do a quick review, go through the story timeline from my perspective, and go through some of the finances of ABIM and the trends of those finances, which are quite disturbing to me as an accountant and should be disturbing to ABIM and the ABIM board members and ABIM Foundation board members. So today's topic is the slow motion financial death spiral of ABIM and what I and also Kurt Eichenwald perceived as a bailout scheme. This new MOC that was recently implemented was a bailout scheme to rescue ABIM from their deteriorating financial condition. My presentation is available online now at charlespkroll.com/ama.html. And I tweeted it out about an hour ago. And my Twitter handle is Charles P. Kroll. As Dr. Shapiro mentioned, I'm a graduate of Loyola University of Chicago, a finance and accounting major, member of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. I was born Mercy Hospital in Southside Chicago, raised in Chicago Heights, which is about 35 miles south of the Loop. If you have any, I'll be available for questions after the session, and feel free to contact me through Twitter or via email, and it's cpkroll@outlook.com. Just a couple disclosures. People have, it's come up from time to time, who put me up to this, who's really behind my efforts. A I want to make clear that nobody put me up to this. I tripped over it by accident at the end of July of 2014. I'm obviously not a physician or an attorney. I think that's important to note because I'm constantly asked if what I'm finding is illegal, and I'm obviously don't have the qualifications to render an opinion on that. But I have reached out to a number of law firms, and that's still ongoing. I want to make clear that I was unaware of ABIM or maintenance of certification prior to the spring of 2014. I had never heard of ABIM, and I had never heard of maintenance of certification. I've invested voluntarily and very happily about 1,500 uncompensated hours on my research, Twitter time, just various accounting analysis and so on and so forth. And I have ongoing relationships with investigative journalists as we speak. This is very hot. There's a great deal of interest in this story among journalists, and it's still being pursued. Just want to be clear, if it's not obvious, that the opinions expressed are my own and not necessarily those of the Pennsylvania Medical Society or obviously the American Medical Association. This is a quote from Eichenwald's article last April, and that of course is available online. I've broken down my presentation into 3 chapters. Chapter 1 is deja vu all over again. I've seen this story before in Minnesota, different facts obviously, but it was that was a warm-up to this story. Chapter 2 is, it's not a complicated story, what I perceive to be the slow motion financial death spiral of ABIM. It's very simple actually, and Chapter 3 is what I'm calling the desecration of the flag. As most of you may know, ABIM is incorporated in the state of Iowa. I did meet with the Attorney General, 2 attorneys at the Iowa Attorney General's office last year, and we'll touch on that at the end of the presentation. And finally, my recommendations that I made to the Iowa Attorney General's office. Just quickly, some definitions. When I say consolidated, I'm referring to both ABIM and the foundation combined. I won't get into the accounting minutia, but the term deferred revenue will come up. Basically, that's prepaid unearned certification cash that ABIM has received and has basically financed their losses. In other words, they've used cash that was intended for years 2 through 10 to pay for expenses in year 1. So basically, that's how they've been kept afloat, and they do have other sources of income that have kept them afloat. The fiscal year is June 30, so they're from July 1 to June 30, the fiscal year for both ABIM and the foundation. I did want to mention that the foundation was incorporated in Pennsylvania in 1989. They only recently correctly reported both the state and the year of incorporation on their Form 990. They reported incorrect states of incorporation and incorrect dates of incorporation for a number of years. Fund balance is all it is assets minus liabilities. That represents the financial condition or lack thereof of a non-for-profit. It's in the for-profit world, it's also referred to as equity or net worth on a personal financial statement, just assets minus liabilities. Operating losses is program revenue minus program expenses, and then the term program services will come up, and basically all that is the revenue and expenses for ABIM's and ABIM Foundation's defined mission. And we can, of course, this is available online. And in 1998, I formed an organization called Minnesotans for HMO Reform. In the year 2000, Attorney General Mike Hatch in Minnesota launched an investigation of Allina and Medica, Medica being Allina's HMO. Allina and Medica at the time, and probably still are, the nonprofit front for United Health in Minnesota. In 2001, Mike Hatch released an audit report, and prior to that time I provided forensic accounting support to the Attorney General's office, working with Lori Swanson. At the time she was the Assistant Attorney General. She incorporated a lot of my forensic accounting work in this final 7-volume audit report. And Mike Hatch, at the end of the day, broke up Allina and Medica and replaced the CEO and board of directors. So he basically cleaned house. And then the following month, I testified at the Minnesota Senate Finance Committee hearing as they were wrapping up this audit, what to do to prevent these types of abuses that were going on in Minnesota from happening again. And then I was quoted the following day that Medica was cooking the books, which they were in fact cooking the books, as the Attorney General uncovered. The ABIM story timeline, this all started with an article by Dr. Linda Gerges, our medical specialty board's extorting its physicians. I've worked with docs for about 25 years now, and I thought the word extortion, it was unusual for a physician to use that word, and that got my attention, and that really got me into the story. The original plan was I would look at ABIM financial information, not knowing what I would find, not expecting to find any surprises, to be honest. And then Dr. Gerges would handle the clinical side to the maintenance of certification issue. I obviously was shocked at my findings. Basically, ABIM was bankrupt on paper. And I contacted 2 national media organizations. One of them said, hey, work with us, we like the story, and they turned around and requested 12 years of audited financial statements from ABIM to match the number of years of tax returns I had in my possession. The response a few weeks later was, as I understand it, was no, sorry, you're not getting any of them, but what we'll do is we'll come to your office, we'll show you 1 year, and then since they're so complicated and so on and so forth, you can't keep any copies. So basically they would meet with the journalist, show them the 1 year of financial statements, and then walk out the door and not provide a copy. So at that point it was pretty much game on for me. That's all the motivation. That's all the motivation I need. If I told you the media organization, you'd be shocked. It wasn't the Pittsburgh Gazette, with all due respect. Fast forward 4 months, a call by the media to the Pennsylvania governor's press secretary. Actually, we were able to shake, or the journalist was able to shake loose 2 years of audited financial statements that the foundation was required to file with the state of Pennsylvania. And I just wanted to quickly go through what ABIM has posted. And also in January 2015, ABIM, the middle box there, ABIM posted for the first time their 990 tax returns, and they posted both the ABIM standalone financial statements and the consolidated financial statements. That was concurrent when we obtained the copies of the 2 years from the state of Pennsylvania. I just wanted to note that there were, as of November 7th, there were absolutely no 990s available on the website and no financial reports. So we're looking at about day 500 of Dr. Barron's tenure where there was nothing available. And then finally, between November 7th and January 12th, they started to post, maybe feeling the heat, posted the financial, both the 990s and the financial reports. Well, lo and behold, you know, the gift that kept on giving, ABIM posted financial statements that omitted supplementary information that they had provided to the state of Pennsylvania. I thought, how clever are they? And the following, as soon as I found that out, I posted an article in Med City News that ABIM omitted 6 key financial schedules. In the private sector or out at medical clinics, this would be grounds for termination, this type of a stunt. But that's what they did, and I pounded them on Twitter for about 2 weeks, and they relented and quietly reposted the complete audited financial statements, and which I was grateful for. But I was seeing, okay, they're still in this kind of scheming and hiding mode, and they obviously didn't know that I had copies of the statements from the state of Pennsylvania. But they did in fact post the full set of statements thereafter. The next day after the Med City article, I went public with my first YouTube video, In the Grasp of the Gang. 16 questions to test your knowledge of the madcap financial adventures at ABIM. A few weeks later, I published a sneak preview of their audited financial statements where their cash doubled from 24 million to 48 million. And then episode 2 was what I call the one weird accounting trick. To keep ABIM afloat was the receipt of all this deferred revenue or all this prepaid cash that they had at their disposal that they were applying to current year losses. On November 10th, Kurt Eichenwald came out with the first article, and then a month later, I was quoted in the Newsweek number 2. And then on May 1st of last year, I met with the attorney. I met in Des Moines at the Iowa Attorney General's office, and I've provided some links to both some resources that the Iowa Governor's Nonprofit Task Force published, and also an excerpt from their from that publication stating that nonprofits must be publicly open and accountable, must be well managed with appropriate financial reporting, and work with the Iowa Attorney General. ABIM is governed by the state of Iowa nonprofit laws. On May 21st, Eichenwald came out with Newsweek number 3, and then a day later, Dr. Barron issued his denial, the obfuscate, hide, or delay denial. I would like to note that in his denial, he did not get his compensation correct. In his denial, he understated his compensation by about $69,000. His actual compensation for the period that we're looking at was $812,000. Just wanted to note that on June 1st, National Quality Forum, now headed by Dr. Castle. At the time they hired ABIM's lobbyist. A month later, ABIM terminated their lobbyist, which Kurt Eichenwald raised in, I believe, both number 1 and number 2. And then in September, Kurt Eichenwald came out with Newsweek number 4. In November of last year, ABIM posted their financial statements. This time, however, they did not post the standalone ABIM financial statements, unlike the prior January, because they, in my opinion, they were buried. The deficit for ABIM of $50 million is buried on page 19 or 20. So, unlike page 3 on the standalone financial statements, the deficit was conveniently buried. And they also made a change in the classification of this non-public partnership that they're invested in, that we recently found out is now invested in the Cayman Islands. On April 12th, the Oklahoma governor signed the SB 1148 banning forced mock. It passed unanimously in the House, Senate, and House Public Health Committee. And then most recently, as I mentioned, ABIM uploaded their 990 tax returns, and they disclosed for the first time that this TIF Keystone Partnership, which is now, they now have $37.5 million, or had $37.5 million invested at the end of last June. In fact, has 11 investments in the Cayman Islands. I think it's very reckless and not appropriate for a nonprofit to be investing so much money in a non-public partnership. They had absolutely no money in a non-public investment in 2012, and now they're about 55% of your investments are in non-publicly traded vehicles, investment vehicles. Just quickly running through the numbers, the ABIM's value, if you will, or consolidated fund balance, as they call it, peaked at $62 million in the year 2000. And at the end of last year, June 30, it was $26.6 million. So this is going in the wrong direction. The S&P 500 over this period was up 45%, while ABIM's consolidated fund balance is down 57% in the last 15 years. The ABIM, again on a consolidated basis, is hemorrhaging cash. Operating losses in the last 7 years have been $59.3 million. Now that does not include the Choosing Wisely donations by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. But ABIM is taking that money in and also dispersing some of that money out. So it's just ABIM Foundation is a conduit for a lot of that money. So they've been racking up substantial amount of losses. I just, for purposes, if this presentation is to be challenged, I won't go through these numbers, but I just wanted to reconcile or show in detail to the penny how ABIM's value has dropped 40% since the end of 2008. And that's in spite of $328 million in revenue. And then I tweeted this out over the weekend, but this is just a chart illustrating the salaries in the last 7 years of $187 million. Employee new hires has increased 46%, with about 60% of those new hires being paid over $100,000. So as you can see, most recently, the ramp up from 2013 to 2015 in the new employee hires. And as I've mentioned a few times, this artificial life support, this is the prepaid money that they've received, $38.3 million, and this cash that they had on hand has helped them finance their losses. And then finally, I would like to report that the new mock has been a financial success, but unfortunately I can't do so. I mean, to add insult to injury, they've actually brought in quite a bit of new cash. There's been a $7.7 million increase in mock revenue in the last 2 years, but unfortunately, certification exam fee income dropped $5 million, and program expenses and overhead have increased by over 8 million. So that basically wiped out, and then some, this increase, this 7.7 increase in revenue. So my takeaway from this is that this scheme of theirs to bail out their financial condition in the new mock program has been a failure. They are, to me, there's a culture of excess spending. I think the donations from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, it was like pouring gasoline on a fire. I think they went crazy with their new employee hires, and as these numbers illustrate, the numbers are going in the wrong direction. Finally, desecration of the flag of Iowa. ABIM has a deficit of over 50 million as of June 30 of last year. That's just the cover sheet for my meeting with the Attorney General's office. And these are my recommendations. What I'm referring to as the Hatch model is that the Iowa Attorney General replace the board of directors, top management and operations management. This is based everything that Mike Hatch did up in Minnesota. Force the liquidation of this non-publicly traded partnership, and then force the dissolution of ABIM Foundation, which is incorporated in Pennsylvania. They would have to coordinate that with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, and then move the remaining cash back to ABIM and restore ABIM's financial condition. And my final recommendation to the Iowa Attorney General's office is to designate this prepaid money. I know it's stopping, it's slowing down, it may be done and over with, but to designate all this prepaid money that they've been basically putting their hand in the cookie jar to pay their current losses, is to basically escrow that money or designate it as restricted so they can no longer tap into that money to pay for their current losses. So unless ABIM cuts anywhere between 5 and 10 million in operating expenses through layoffs and other cost reductions, they're in serious financial trouble. And of course, a correction in the stock market could easily wipe out their fund balance overnight.